Welcome to Lead Different, the podcast that redefines leadership and challenges the status quo. Hosted by Daniel Dominguez, founder and CEO of Why Not Leadership. This show is your compass to becoming a better leader through the power of self-awareness. Good leaders foster teams that are engaged, empowered, and energized. Join us on this transformative journey as we equip you with the tools and insights to lead different. Get ready to challenge the ordinary and embrace self-aware leadership. This is Lead Different.
Subscribe now. Discover a new era of leadership. Lead different, because great leaders change the world.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Lead Different podcast. I can't wait to introduce you to our guest today, my good friend, TJ Bennett. He began his coaching career after 25 plus years in the ad industry. He worked as a creative director and writer for agencies big and small, including TBWA, Chiat, Saatchi, Ogilvy, Holliday, and garage team Mazda. TJ's mission is to DesuckifyWork. We are all at our best when we have what we need to thrive, and his long journey through Adland has taught him one powerful truth. Only creativity can stop the suck. We spend years using our creativity to solve massive client problems, and we're good at it. Yet, despite our success, we're often unhappy, frustrated, and stuck. What if we turn that creativity inward? That's what TJ does for creative leaders as an ICF-certified executive coach. He helps you tap into your beautifully weird mind to make your work life as amazing as the work you create for your clients. Better, even. Together, you're going to solve big, juicy problems like imposter syndrome, lack of purpose and meaning, low employee engagement, and lack of fun. Remember fun? Well, let's make sure we bring our guest onto the stage so we can talk about that fun. How are you doing today, TJ?
I'm doing great, Dan. Good to see you.
It's good to see you. Let's play around with our layout here a little bit and get you the spotlight. So good to have you on. Loved reading that intro because I know your history. We've known each other for a few years. We met through our affiliation with the Y Institute when you became a Y certified coach. But we also met through the ICF Arizona.
Yes.
Gary and I were invited to speak at ICF Arizona, and that's where I think we made that first connection. So you're an ICF certified coach. You've got a tremendous amount of experience in a really fun world. And I love that you say, hey, remember fun. Work is supposed to be fun because we spend too much time doing it not to have fun. But welcome to the show, TJ. And you know what? Let's start with a really simple question. Why let's desuckify work?
Well, I think anybody who's worked for more than a few minutes recognizes that there's room for improvement in how we work. And that's not necessarily through any one person's fault or the organization's fault. It's just human beings, when we come together, stuff can get a little messy sometimes. And it actually takes a little work to make it not suck. And so, my experience in advertising is that when it was awesome, it was amazing. And the creativity flows and you're having fun and the ideas are coming. But when it's not awesome, when it's not fun, when you're feeling that suck, your work quality isn't as good either. So to me, the let's desuckify work is both for each individual to get the most out of their work experience, but also every company is going to do better when your team is having fun and enjoying the work each day. So why not find ways to make the work not suck and actually maybe make it even fun and joyful and fulfilling, and watch your results go where you want them to go.
I like that you talk about desuckifying as I think we're all involved in that, right? At work. And you talk about the creativity, that it takes creativity to desuckify work. Tell me about what are you finding that most people are missing, that because we can all be creative. So why aren't we being creative?
I think there's two things that show up for me there. One is I think we just don't necessarily think to bring our creativity towards either ourselves or our workplace. We're so busy in any job, but certainly in the advertising world. Every day there's some new creative challenge for your client. right? And you're sitting there trying to come up with a new ad campaign, something new and brilliant that's not been done before. And we're sucking all of that energy into that process that we often let ourselves and the way we work kind of take, sort of second fiddle to that. And it's understandable, but I think if we just spent a little time and used some of that creative energy towards ourselves, it would make a big difference, right? And I also think we're not necessarily, like, our brains are not necessarily trained to think about ourselves and the way we work as a creative problem to be solved. I think we can get caught up in oh, I'm complaining about it and I understand there's something wrong, but when it comes time to fixing it, it can feel daunting, and it can feel almost like just outside of our grasp. And so we're not necessarily embracing our creative side in that process. One of the things I like to do in my coaching practice, if you work in advertising and you get a new creative project to work on, it starts with something they call the creative brief. And it's a pretty simple, usually a one-page document that outlines the problem you're trying to solve for the client and gives you just enough background information so you can start to solve it. And you're pointing towards something very specific in terms of the outcome you're trying to achieve. So I ask my clients when they start working with me to develop a creative brief for themselves or their business. So we know what is the problem we're trying to solve when it comes to how you work, and where are we pointing to? I ask them, usually the question I ask is, what is the one headline that you're aiming towards that you'd like to say when you're done with the coaching work we do together? Once you distill it down into that, I think it activates the creative neurons in our brain to think, okay, now I can start putting the same energy towards this problem because it's now looking similar to the way my brain has been focused for however many years I've been doing it in my career. So I found that to be really helpful. It kind of strips away the overwhelm that we can feel when faced with the, oh my God, I'm not happy at work, or oh my God, I'm not sure if I'm leading my business in the right way.
Oh man. And I love the way you've taken something you've used your whole life and now you're
Mhm.
using it in your coaching. So I
Yeah.
talk about that all the time. You don't have to do it the way everyone else does. You got to
Mhm.
bring your own into it. And I think that's probably what you mean by turning that creativity inward. Hey, one thing I'm going
Mhm.
to ask you, TJ, I lost your sound a little bit. So let's make sure you stay close to that microphone because
Got it.
you faded away a couple of times. But
Ah,
we were able to hear most of it.
okay.
But tell me what, because I love when we say that's what you do for creative leaders. You help them tap
Mhm.
into their beautifully weird mind to
Yeah.
make your work life as amazing as the work you create for clients and even better. So, what are
Mm.
some ways that you turn that beautifully weird mind inward so we can make that amazing work?
Well, I think it shows up differently for every person that I work with, but what I notice is that each person finds some way of connecting to that piece of them that they use in their regular day-to-day work life. And as soon as they see their own work life as a similar kind of problem to be solved, it just seems to trigger that part of the brain. And so um, you can invite this process in so many ways. I come from a writing background, so a lot of my clients can appreciate, just finding ways of using writing to explore a problem. Others have more of a visual background, so maybe you're using visual cues or drawing or sketching or even playing around with AI tools and just using that to trigger your brain in the same way you would when you're sitting there going, how do I create a new campaign for a client? I think the beauty is tapping into your own awareness about who you are. I know, Dan, you talk a lot about self-awareness as key for leadership, and I think that's really valuable when you're trying to open up that creative part of yourself too. Like, who am I? We can talk about, the why, the YOS too. The more I understand what really makes me tick, the more I can, like, summon that to solve the problems that are in front of me when it comes to how I work or how I want my company to work. So uh, I try to use all of those tools, but each client's a little different. So we kind of do it as more of a menu, and then we let everybody choose what works best for them.
That's really cool. So let's talk about that because one of the cool things I get to do with coaches and now with my clients
Mm-hmm.
is take you through your YOS discovery.
Yeah.
something you went through, and then something that we had to massage a little, and then come
Hmm.
back with, and now you're using it with your clients. So,
Hmm.
as I know, a lot of our listeners are fellow YOS coaches or just coaches in the industry. But your
Hmm.
why operating system starts with make sense. So you're
Hmm.
someone who loves to solve problems, especially if they're complex and challenging. And
Hmm.
how you do that is by finding better ways to do things. So you find better ways to solve
Hmm.
problems. Again, turning creativity inward,
Yep.
using the powers you use at work on yourself and on your business, taking
Hmm.
that creative brief
Yeah.
and doing it on yourself. So you're always looking for better ways to make sense of the complex and challenging in
Hmm.
order to contribute, to make a difference in the lives of others, the life of your clients, the business of your clients. Let's talk a little bit about that. How did it feel to you the first time we went through your results?
It was really interesting. As you mentioned, the initial results uh, needed a little bit of massaging, but what happened with the initial why, so I took it separately, right? So you guys showed up at the ICF event and you guys did the why first, and then I eventually went back and finished the YOS as I, stayed in touch with you guys and kind of finished it. So we did that why initial discovery in what felt like 3 minutes. It's probably more like 6 or 7. Um, and as soon as I saw the words make sense, it was just like the light bulb moment. I've always defined myself as someone who likes to solve problems or as a creative problem solver. That's always been what got me excited about the advertising business. Was pretty
Mhm.
much every day you're faced with a new problem, usually a complex problem that you have to kind of break down and come up with an elegant, beautiful, creative, and clever solution to. So it just clicked. It's like it's interesting. You know it somewhere in the back of your brain. You're aware of that, and you're trying to find the language to describe it. And what I loved about the why discovery was that it gave me the perfect language, to explain what makes me tick. And then when we went through the full YOS, and we ultimately got to that better way, it reminded me of this process I went through with one of my teams that I was leading years ago. Um, we would just keep this running. I think it might have been just a Google Doc of the top question was just what if, and then it was just everybody could contribute to what if we did things this way? What if we did things this way? What if we changed the way we did this? And this could be anything from some grand way of doing business to like a different way of doing our timesheets. Like it could be anything. But what I realized looking back at that is I was leaning into my better way and inviting people to share in that process with me of let's think of better ways to make our ad agency work better. And then I think the contribute, this desire to make an impact, to make a difference. Again, it's always been there for me. When you finish a project in advertising, there's something beautiful about having this finished product that you get to see go out into the world, and you can see the difference it makes in real time. But I think it's ultimately also what led me to coaching. Right? It's the
Right.
part of my job that I always loved and really started to love a lot towards the latter years of my career was seeing the difference you can make in each individual's lives and in your team's lives and in the way they work each day by how you lead. And so that contribute just jumped off the page for me as well, because I was like, yeah, that is ultimately what I'm wanting to do is make a difference. I think some of that can be true for everybody, but for some of us, it's front and center, and I think it definitely is for me.
Yeah, I definitely see that in you. I see it in the interviews that you conduct. And by the
Mhm.
way, there's going to be a link to TJ's podcast, the DesuckifyWork podcast, which is
Yes,
fantastic. I love the interviews that you do. I
thank you.
love the way you dig deep into some things. You truly are trying to solve problems, finding better ways, and contributing to the success not only of your guests but of your clients also.
Mhm.
So I really do see that playing out. One of the things I wanted to ask you about is now that you've been doing this now for a couple of years,
Mhm.
and you definitely you living into your YOS. How do you use it? Because you've got a couple of certifications. You're also DISC certified. You're also an ICF certified ACC coach, and you're DISC certified. So you have different tools at your disposal. How do you use the different tools, and how does being on the other side of it, we walked through yours with a real fine-tooth comb. Have you had any challenging situations with the YOS or with DISC or with other things that you're doing, and how are you overcoming those in order to get to that person that's inside that we want to unlock?
Yeah, I mean, I think the beauty of any of these tools is they're a tool to come back to that idea of self-awareness, right? They help us understand ourselves better. And what I've discovered in using them, whether it's the YOS or DISC or any of the other tools I like to use, is, there's value in the result, but there's also value in the way you may react to the result and the way the conversation forms around that result. So maybe a particular result doesn't totally connect with somebody, and that's okay. What's more important is, does it spark some interesting thought for yourself? Do you see any of that in you, and where do you see it in you? And if you don't see it in you, what does that mean for you going forward, right? So it's not about you having to align 100% with every result you get with any kind of tool or assessment, as much as does it generate questioning for yourself? Does it make you think about the way you show up? Does it even make you think about, the stories that you tell about yourself? One of the things I've noticed in taking assessments myself is, I think this was maybe when I took Clifton Strengths or something like that. When you take an assessment and you're answering questions, you're answering based on your best available knowledge about yourself at the time, right? And so you may have a story, and my story, I think, was something along the lines of, I don't love the sort of execution side of business as much as I love the idea generating side. And there's truth to that. I'm a big idea person, but I realized after getting some of these results, and it sort of prodded me to dig deeper into myself, that it's not so much that I don't like the execution. Actually, when I'm in execution mode, I can be pretty fanatical and pretty obsessed about getting it right and getting it to a place I love. There's this transition moment from idea to execution where you have to kind of let go of certain ideas and decide to follow one. And that was actually where the insight was that I can have trouble letting go of ideas if I'm really sort of falling in love with them. So it opened up new awareness for me, even if the result that showed up in that particular assessment maybe was not 100% accurate. It was accurate at the time because that was the story I was telling myself. But now I've updated my story because I took that assessment and it gave me the impulse to dig deeper and go, what's really going on? And I think that's ultimately what you're trying to get with any of these tools, including YOS.
So when you look at that, and it's interesting because we know that your how is to find a better way. I can see people with the how better way have a hard time letting go of that idea because it might be a better idea. Which idea am I going to execute on? And what if I choose the wrong one and I left the better one on the table and I started to execute on this one, right? So I can see where that, one of the things we talk about with people with the why a better way anywhere in their top 3 is that difficulty they have of, it's almost FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. Am I leaving the best idea there? And am I executing on the wrong one? Do I need to go back? Do I need to tweak? So that constant tweaking. But I can also see what a gift that is for your clients because they know they're always tapping into your creativity. You're always going to say, hey, there's a better way. And then the other characteristics that we know about folks with the how better way is when you find a better way, you share it. Yeah. And so they know they're going to get those ideas, that constant improvement. And there's a whole industry around continuous improvement, right? Well, that's a place where you probably are very comfortable. DJ, you've also, done a lot of things to coach people. So what is it in your coaching that allows you to use these tools to help people become better leaders and live better lives?
I think for me, one of the strengths I have as a coach, and I've tried to be really honest with myself about where my strengths are and where my areas of growth are is my presence and my listening. I really enjoy being in it with my client and really listening and paying attention and paying attention for the need, right? What are the needs that are showing up as they discuss what may initially be one challenge that they're facing, but underneath it, what's going on there, right? And when you pay attention for the need, it then usually signals, okay, how can I help them with one of these tools, right? So if somebody, even though let's say somebody shows up and they're talking about challenges maybe they're having with their boss, right? And underneath it, though, what you're really hearing is like, I'm not fulfilled and I'm not living up to my potential and I'm not getting that opportunity to sort of step on that bigger stage and really show the world who I am, so I can live my purpose. Well, you hear those notes and you dig into those notes. And when you see that that's really what's showing up, that's an opportunity to say, would you be interested in exploring this YOS, right? Because then it's like you can finally get clear on what's making you tick, and then you can finally articulate that to the people around you, whether it's your boss, your coworkers, people even on your team, and say, this is what really gets me going every day. And so not only am I looking for more of it, but I want you to have that understanding about me as well. So when I show up with a certain mindset, you're kind of getting where I'm coming from, and you're opening conversation by inviting people into that understanding.
That's absolutely so true, TJ. And I see it. How often does a client come to you with thinking they're going to work on this problem? And because you're so good at listening and being present, you end up fixing something completely different.
I think that's always to some degree, right? I mean, I think we only know what we know when we initially show up to coaching, right? And usually there's something strong enough and powerful enough to get us saying, I need to fix this problem, right? And let's just say it is something like struggling with my boss, or I'm struggling with a member on my team. And those are real problems and they're important problems. But usually the bigger growth happens when you realize that those problems are part of other patterns that show up in our life because we're maybe not being able to live in our purpose. Or if you look at a tool like DISC, it's like maybe we're struggling to communicate with people, both in terms of getting people to understand our own needs in communication or in understanding how our team likes to be communicated. So any of these tools can help us grow further in that regard. And I think, to me, this is ultimately the benefit of coaching, right? Yes, it's great to solve the problem that we show up with on day one, but we are doing so much more for a client if you can help them see sort of the underlying truth and the underlying patterns in the way we're showing up every day, and we can make some adjustments to those. Because otherwise, you can solve a problem and then it becomes a whack-a-mole, right? Oh, I solved that problem, but now it shows up over here because I haven't really fixed the problem of I'm not showing up with my purpose, or I'm not figuring out how to communicate well with my team or with my peers or with my my leadership team. So yes, let's attack the problems that show up initially, but let's dig deeper. I think that's where if you're really looking to grow beyond where you are, you have to dig deeper. And that's where the good stuff shows up as far as I'm concerned. And that's where we get creative, because now it's like, how do we bring all that beautiful creativeness in your mind to solve the challenges that go way deeper than, whatever's showing up for you on the surface.
Yeah, I read a quote. You're probably familiar with it. It said, creativity is intelligence having fun.
Yes, I have heard that. And it's beautiful. And I think the fun part is so important. I think if you're not having fun, whether it's at work or even like when you're being coached and you're exploring yourself, if you're really like bearing down on it, the process doesn't open up the way you need it to. So I think you want to lighten it a little bit so that people can open up learning that just doesn't show up when you're not having fun. And in the advertising business, I will say this, it's night and day. You step into a room and people are having fun and the ideas are flowing. You step into a room and people are feeling the weight of some sort of systemic rule around, we've got to be all business all the time. Those ideas are going to be 1/10 at best of what you see when people are having fun.
Yeah, you know what? And there's two schools, right? Pressure is good. Too much pressure is not good.
Yeah.
You want to feel that pressure that's forcing
Hmm.
you to out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
But if you put so much pressure on the end result or whatever it is that you're working on, where it's rigid. The other
Mhm.
thing that one of my coaches talks about all the time is the importance of psychological freedom.
Mm.
Being free to express yourself, being able
Yeah.
to, I just talked to Paul McCarthy or McCartney. Gosh, I wish I could remember, but Paul was a great guest. He talks
Yeah.
about being a fired leader, and each
Mm.
one of those letters in fired stood for something. So
Mm.
free thinking, and it was an acronym. But he
Mhm.
said, he spent a large part of his career as a senior leader being hired for the exact same qualities that he would later be fired for.
Mm.
So because he was energized and he would be willing to challenge and say,
Mhm.
"Oh, we love that is great. We want you to come do those things."
Yeah.
But then when he turned that creativity and all that upward and said, "Hey,
Yeah.
why are we doing it like this?"
Hey.
The boss didn't like being looked at that way. And then so he
Yeah.
wrote a book called The Fired Leader, talking
I love
exactly
that.
about that. And excuse me. And
Mhm.
it's those things that happen because I think as leaders, we want those creative, fun,
Mhm.
energetic people that are going to look at things differently
Yeah.
and challenge until they turn it on us. And then we say, "Oh, wait, maybe I don't like you so much," right?
Oh,
Um,
geez. Yeah.
and you work in an environment for many years where that is exactly the kind of people you want, those creatives, right?
Mhm.
So your mission is to help ad agencies become better places to work,
Yeah.
and you're dedicated to creating ad agencies or helping transform ad agencies into more fulfilling and supportive work environments.
Mhm.
So is that your ideal client? Is that who you're mostly working with right now, ad agencies?
It is. I mean, I work with folks outside of that business, and I certainly welcome folks who are open to my approach from other businesses. But coming from that business, being passionate about that business, and being in it for a long enough time to have some perspective on that business, it's really fun to work with agencies or somebody who's a leader within an agency to help them, you know, make it a better place to work, which ultimately leads to the kind of results that people want in terms of, I call it all the P words, productivity and profit and performance and all that stuff. And I think to your point, yes, there's this balance, right? I think you want to have fun to create that sort of psychological freedom. As one of my recent podcast guests said, you want to leave room for vulnerability, for people
Mhm.
to be comfortable to share like the craziest, weirdest ideas that for in a lot of groups they might feel afraid to like put it out there. But there needs to be, whether you call it pressure or it's more of some kind of orientation towards something that is motivating you to do better, right? To create something that has an impact, to do something that wows people. Um, so having that balance of yes, I'm going to expect certain things in terms of the kind of work we need to succeed as an ad agency, but I can't do that with a heavy hand. So I want you directionally pointing to these things, and then I want to create this kind of uh, playground for you where there's a lot of space for you to kind of run around, shout out ideas, poke fun at each other, have fun with each other, like be in the moment with each other. Um, but knowing somewhere in the back of your brain that you're pointing towards something. And that's ultimately usually what this creative brief does, where you know where you're pointing towards. And the beauty of it is that it works in ad agencies and then it works in the client engagements as well. I want people to feel that know where they're pointing to, but
Right.
when we're working together, I don't want it to feel like homework all the time, and I don't want it to feel like a classroom. I want it to feel like a free and open and safe space for just spitting out whatever's on your mind, and then we can figure out what we can learn from it.
You said something real important, and thank you, TJ. You said something real important. Why you like working with ad agencies? That's where you spent your life, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the things I have found and I coach primarily on leadership through
Hmm.
self-awareness. So I
Hmm.
like working with leaders because I've always been in that space. I've been in
Yeah.
leadership positions since seventh grade, I think, of sixth grade, I think. And
Yeah.
so you learn a lot of things. One of the things that I've noticed is there are leadership lessons that I've learned that just come second nature to me. But then when I
Hmm.
share them with a client who's maybe, they started a company and they had
Hmm.
a great idea and now they've got a staff of 30. And guess what?
Hmm.
They're leaders and they never wanted to be a leader. They
Yeah.
wanted to do what they
Do
do
that
really well,
thing.
whether
Yeah.
it's plumbing, accounting, whatever it is that they
Hmm.
do. But now
Yeah.
they're leading a team
Hmm.
and they ask a question. I'm like, oh, you just do this. Do you run into that, especially because you're going into your niche in the ad world? Do you have
Yeah.
a story that you can remember where somebody was like, thought you were brilliant, and you're like, I just really that's what I would have done naturally, right?
I mean, I can't necessarily think of like that one specific story, but I will say that happens pretty frequently, right? I think, you know, we rarely give ourselves credit for what we know because we think, God, if I figured it out, who everybody else probably did too. But we also forget that we all have our own journeys and we're all at different stages of our life and our career, and so those things may show up at different points, or we may just have had the perfect opportunity to learn that lesson that they haven't had yet. One of the reasons I love working with emerging leaders in the ad business because um, you can open someone's eyes with an insight really quickly. It's like, oh, I didn't even realize that was a factor in this job, right? I mean, going from doing to leading is a giant leap. Um, and it's not one, certainly in advertising, I don't think it's one that people are well prepared for. And so you show up as a leader and you do your best and you figure it out, and maybe you have some mentors that you kind of lean into for modeling behavior. But when you're actually in it, you're just kind of baffled by a lot of it. And I think one of the things that I think a lot of people notice but don't know what to do with is sort of the politics of leadership, right? And that's a dirty word, and I get it, and nobody wants to sort of acknowledge that politics are there, but they are there, right? And the need to pay attention to what everyone else that you are collaborating with wants and needs. And that's really ultimately what politics is, right? Politics is people advocating for what they need. And it can get ugly and messy if we're not doing it well and if the team doesn't lead in a way that creates the right space for that. But you need to be aware of it. You need to know that what you want and what you need may be different than what someone else on your team wants and needs. And therefore, you're going to bump into some things as a result of that. And how to deal with that and how to demonstrate that you care about your teammates and therefore you're willing to listen and be curious about what's going on for them and find ways to support their needs where you can. That's part of the deal when you're leading, and you don't see that until you're in it. And so as a coach, it can be really helpful to just shine a light on that for people and go, how do you want to show up? How do you want people to see your needs and your wants as a leader and support them? And then does that open your eyes a little bit on how you might show up for the rest of the people in your team? It usually does. And it's usually, I think, kind of eye opening for people because we almost want to believe it doesn't exist until we realize it exists. And we'd be a lot better off if we figure out how to engage with it in a meaningful, curious, and collaborative way rather than an adversarial way, which is where it can get to really quickly if we're not paying attention.
What I have found in working with leaders at all levels, I primarily work in the C-suite, but
Mhm.
one of the things that I find is great leaders understand their teams. They
Yeah.
understand their people individually, and they
Mhm.
understand that they're not all the same. They've taken the time to get
Mhm.
to know them.
Yeah.
They've taken the time to understand what is it that drives TJ? What is it
Mhm.
that TJ enjoys doing?
Yeah.
What's important to him? What are his goals at this time? And
Mhm.
one of the things I talk about in leadership is the fact that takes time, right?
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, TJ. I find that conducting a workshop like a
Mhm.
YOS workshop, where
Mhm.
we get to find everybody's drivers and
Yeah.
everybody's hows and whats,
Mhm.
really shortcuts that getting to know people
Oh, yeah.
better. Uh, and so whether you're using DISC, whether you're using Myers-Briggs, whether you're
Mhm.
using Strengths Finders or YOS,
Yeah.
that this is a great way to shortcut. And it takes a talented coach like yourself to bring that out in a team so
Mhm.
that we can get those connections, make those synaptic connections, just like in our brains with the
Mhm.
people that we work with. So we're working with people and putting them in the right seat
Mhm.
for the right job so that they're having fun.
Yeah.
How are you doing that? And I know you're very creative, TJ. So
Yeah.
I'd love to hear some of your creative ideas on that.
Well, first off, I think you're spot on. I often describe coaching as a fast forward button. Just in general, the process of coaching can help you learn the lessons that we often learn through the bumps and bruises of doing it, trying to figure it out on our own. And it usually takes a lot longer if you do that. And then when you bring in a tool like a YOS or a DISC or any of these other ones that can enhance self-awareness quickly and do it in a workshop format and a chance where you have people coming together, it kind of goes from that 2x to 10x on the, when you're hitting the fast forward button multiple times and all of a sudden it's going so fast you can't even see it. That's what I think happens in that space. And when I've delivered a workshop like that, I think my goal is to just make it kind of back to that psychological freedom space. I want people to feel loose and comfortable sharing, not just like, "Ooh, I got my results and I'm gonna make sense," and that really connects, but feeling comfortable enough to like talk about why that matters and maybe how that's shown up. And then when somebody else is a different YOS, that they can go, I get it now, and they're comfortable enough to say, like, you know what, sometimes I think maybe I was judging you your right way and I was feeling that was too rigid or whatever, if I've got some better way in my YOS. And now I see that and now I understand that. So my goal always is to keep the process of that discovery session, that workshop light, fun, it's just have moments of fun. It doesn't have to be just constant jokes and laugh riot, but like giving people a space to laugh at the 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 truth that comes out, right? Like when you realize that this person you've been butting heads with is doing it because they're so driven by something that's a little different than yours, you almost can't help but laugh. It's like, oh my gosh, of course, you're wired this way, I'm wired this way. If we don't know that about each other, of course we're going to butt heads. And now that we know it about each other, we can have real conversations. We can constantly refer back to that language. And the beauty is, like, I was talking to somebody that one of the leaders I did the YOS with as part of their team, and he's like, "Yeah, I keep coming back to it. Like I'll have some conversation with my team, and I'll go, oh yeah, there it makes sense, or oh yeah, I'm a better way." And it constantly feeds on that enlightenment and that self-awareness. So you might have a 2 hour, 3 hour, 4 hour workshop where there's a lot of impact there, but it doesn't go away. That's, I think, the beauty is that, hearing from clients that it shows up in their interactions months and months later. That's pretty cool. I gotta say that definitely taps into my contribute side of my YOS, because it's like, wow, that is actually having an impact.
Yeah, no, I love that you talked about coaching. I mean, there's a lot you said there that's really valuable, but
Mm-hmm.
you talked about coaching being a fast forward button, and I
Mm-hmm.
truly resonate with that.
Mm,
You when you have the right client and you're talking about the right things and
mm-hmm.
you're working on the right goals so that they can become better
Yeah.
leaders, better followers too, and
Mm-hmm.
better I think the stewards of their
Mm-hmm.
mission, right?
Yeah.
It's such a great point you brought up. The other thing is when you said when leaders come back and say, "Hey, I'm using this,"
Mm-hmm.
and one of our fellow coaches uses the term, "It's how you're wired," and she
Mm-hmm.
spells it WHY. RED. It's
Like,
how we are wired. It's
yeah.
how our whys
Mhm.
cause us, for you in your case, cause you to always look, and say, that's why I spend so much time obsessing about problem solving, because I'm gonna make sense. I
Yeah.
love coming up with ideas to make things better,
Mhm.
because my how is better way, and I get so much fulfillment from making a difference in people's lives, because
Mhm.
I'm a contribute what. And so
Yeah.
so you put it all together so that it makes sense for you, and
Mhm.
then you use that experience that you had to help others
Mhm.
make sense of their situation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, it it with the beauty of it, like it makes a big difference in as a leader, as a contributor, as anyone in a work environment. Um, but it also ends up showing up in your personal life too. My wife and I uh, have both gone through the YOS, and it's been eye opening, right? Because my make sense shows up as like uh, really wanting to like dig deep on certain things, but it also shows up as like as soon as I understand it, I want to move on. Um, and that doesn't always jibe. My wife is a clarify
Yes.
why, and the clarify is the person who's going to keep going and does not want to move on until they're 100% clear, right? As it makes sense, it's like I have enough information so that I get it, I move on. As a clarify, you want to fill in the full circle, right? And every dot needs to kind of come in there. And so um, again, you almost laugh. You're like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, of course we're bumping up against that at times because we have different needs in these conversations. And it doesn't stop the bumping up against it. It just gives you the language to be able to sort of sit above it for a moment and go, okay, yeah, I get it. You're wanting more clarity here. I feel like I can move on. So what else? What else do we need here? So I
Yeah.
love how it shows up not just in the workspace, but in all spaces.
Yeah, I had a coach one time that I had on the show talk about the fact that if we use the YOS, and I think what he said, it was love languages, we could save a lot of marriages.
Mhm.
A lot of
Yeah.
marriages could be saved, because yeah, you're right. It's still, especially so you and I my wife is a clarify also.
Mhm.
Makes sense is my what.
Yeah.
I find that once I have an answer, I'm ready to move on.
Yep.
Let's go. And she's like, no, 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 we forgot. Did you think about this? Have you asked
Yeah.
this? Have you asked this? And
Yeah.
so that constant search for clarity until she's clear. What I
Mhm.
also know, and too, is once she's clear, she can move forward.
Yep.
So the key is to give him time to get to that clarity, answer the
Yeah.
questions that they need.
Yeah.
But that is so true. That can be such a tension point. I like
Yeah.
to say, make sense people are looking for answers. Clarify people are looking for questions. And
Mm.
so you're, as soon as you get the answer, you're ready to go. And they're
Yeah.
saying, wait a minute, I bet there's another question we haven't asked. What I love
Mhm.
about having that mix is those people will often ask the question we forgot to ask,
Oh,
right?
1000%. Yeah. Yeah. And it's helpful, right? At times, like you can gloss over something as it makes sense because it's like I've got enough. Um, and I think it also having this language, you can just ask the simple question: Are you clear? Do you have what you need? Like that is all you really need to say to know if you can move on. So it's not like, and now it may be that there's still more questions to be asked, but sometimes it's simply acknowledging the need for clarity goes a long way to just helping somebody see that you care that they have clarity, so
Um,
that you're not just going, I got it, let's go. It's like, I got it. Are you clear? I feel like I'm getting this. Like, are you good, or is there more here? And if there's more here, let's go. If there's not more here, let's go there. So um, the simple opening up of the questions we need to ask in those situations is really powerful.
well, you just hit on something very important, and we call it the platinum rule, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it would be very easy for you to say, hey, hun, does that make sense? And she's going to say, of course it makes sense, but
Yeah.
I'm not clear. So
Mm-hmm.
the fact that it makes sense makes you think I'm good to go.
Yep.
No, I'm not ready to go because it makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. Yes, it makes sense to me. I
Yeah.
need to be clear on a lot of other things before we can move forward. So
Mm-hmm.
using that platinum rule and using her language and say, hey, is it clear?
Yeah.
I in business development, when I run into a person with the why of clarify anywhere in their top three, I always ask, what will it take for you to have the clarity you need to move
Mhm.
forward.
Yeah.
And then just ask the question, and they'll say, well, I'm going to need to know the deadline. I'm going to need to
Mhm.
know what materials you're using. I'm going to need to
Right.
know when the start date is, when the end date is, what are the
Mhm.
warranties, all those questions that our wives think about. They were like, man, I hadn't even thought to ask the guy about all those things, but
Yeah.
I'm glad you were here, because I would have asked myself that later and been like,
Mhm.
well, it made sense that he was going to work on my yard, but I didn't
Yeah.
realize he was going to dig it all up, right? Because we didn't ask those clarifying questions that are so
Exactly.
important.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's the beauty of using the YOS in team situations, right? Is you can quickly see whether or not you've got all of those voices in the room, right? Um, you want to make sense person in the room, but you want a clarify person who might ask those few extra questions. You want a challenge person who might be like, are we even asking the right questions? You want a right way person to make sure, like, we're going to do this. Do we have a process for doing it? Do we know what we're actually going to do once we decide to do it? And then maybe there's a simplify who shows up like, I love that process. What if we just made it these three things instead of those? How does that work? So
Yes.
um, there's so much that can be gained from knowing that you've got the right voices in the room, and then having the language to communicate with each other to get the most out of those voices.
Yeah, no, those you are definitely doing it right, TJ. I'm excited to have you on the show. Listen, if you're listening and you're struggling with a workplace that is not fun. You're
Mm-hmm.
struggling in a workplace where it sucks and you want to desuckify it. I want to encourage you to reach out to TJ Bennett. He's an amazing human being. He's an amazing leader, and he's an amazing coach. I've had the opportunity to coach him, and because we're friends, he's had an opportunity to coach me on a couple of things, and it's I always gain so much from that, TJ. I always finish
Appreciate
the
that.
show on this question, and so I want to ask it of you so we can close up. But
Mm-hmm.
tell us about your biggest why not moment. Our company is called Why Not Leadership, and we love
Mm-hmm.
talking about why not moments, times in our life when we said why not to an opportunity, a career change, a big
Mm-hmm.
decision, and you're so glad you did it. What's that moment for you, TJ?
Mm. Well, I've probably had a few in my life, but I think the big one, is when I decided to go full time as a coach. So, as I mentioned, I worked in advertising for 25 plus years, and it was a great career. I loved it. I loved the work I did. I loved the teams I worked with and the teams I got to lead. Um, and I was in a job, just a little over 2 years ago that was great. I mean, I had a great team. I had great people I worked with. We worked on some fun projects. I had great leadership that I worked with, an interesting client to work on, good pay, stable pay, a paycheck. And with all of that, it would have been easy to just say, sure, I'll keep doing this. But the voice was getting loud in my head saying, you're ready to take on this coaching thing full time. This is now what's calling to you. And so I made that decision to say, why not? I'm gonna rip the Band-Aid off. I'm not gonna just kind of dip my toe in the water. I'm gonna rip that Band-Aid off and jump into coaching full time, get certified, learn the assessments, learn the tools. And I went all in, and I am beyond grateful that I did. I mean, it is a constant sense of growth with this new career, but I love it. I love who I get to work with. I love what I get to do. I love the impact I get to make. And if I didn't say why not, I'd be asking myself, what if? And I'm pretty glad that I'm not asking myself that.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that story, TJ. And not only are you glad you made that decision, I know that your clients are glad you made that decision. I'm glad that you made that decision, because I don't know that our paths would have crossed
Yeah.
otherwise. And you're a great friend, and a great friend of Why Not Leadership and of the Lead
Mhm.
Different podcast. So we're glad to have you in our sphere of influence. We're going to make sure to put your contact information in the show notes for those folks
Appreciate
working.
that.
And whether you're an ad agency or not, if you're just looking for someone to help you make sense of your team,
Mhm.
TJ is the guy you wanna go to. And TJ, I know you stay mostly in Arizona.
Mhm.
You like to work locally, but
Yeah.
are you open to doing remote work via
Oh,
Zoom
yeah.
or those types of platforms?
Yeah, I would say actually right now, most of my clients are outside of the Arizona area. I have some here, but I do a lot of work, whether it's one-on-one coaching or some of the team stuff that I do. Uh, I think it works really well with Zoom. I think we've all kind of cracked the code on how to make that work and keep it fun, keep it so that you're feeling that connection, that vibe, that energy. So yeah, I welcome anybody from anywhere. I've worked with international clients. I mean, if you're up for it, um, I'm here and I'm ready to do it.
Thank you so much, TJ. This has been an enjoyable time. I always love catching up with you. I love
Likewise.
hearing about the, and by the way, talk about creative. His company is the Pudding Factory. TJ goes to the Pudding Factory every day. And I do want to not forget to mention, you love cats and you've had a couple of losses recently.
Mm,
So hey, know that we're thinking about you. And I know it's tough when you lose a
thank you.
longtime pet that you've had for a long time. I went through that last summer.
Mm.
I know it's tough. We want you to keep your head up. Do you have a replacement in the works, or are you already
Ah,
searching the shelters?
we are we are thinking about it, and we're certainly exploring. It's hard to figure out when it's the right time to do it, but it's also hard to avoid that innate desire to want to bring someone new into your home who you can share all that love and have all that fun and enjoy with.
Well, you're a great animal lover. You're a great coach, a great person. So we're glad to have you on, TJ. What do you say we end the show on that note?
That sounds great. Why not?
Thank you so much, TJ. Guys, make sure you comment and let us know what you think of the show. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the Why Not Leadership podcast, the Lead Different podcast. And let us know what you think of our chat with TJ or any one of the people that we bring on. This is all built to help you lead different as you move forward in your leadership journey. Thank you and have a great rest of your week.
Subscribe now. Discover a new era of leadership. Lead different because great leaders change the world.